I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the cake, the song, even just a hug. Instead, my son walked in holding a shiny envelope. Inside was a grocery store gift card, $25. I smiled like it didn't sting. But that same evening, I saw the photos online, him giving my daughter-in-law's mother the deed to a $300,000 ranch. On my birthday. They say growing old is a privilege, but no one talks about how quiet it gets. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind that hums through the walls of a house that used to echo with laughter, with slammed doors and burned dinners, with music from old radios and sticky fingers grabbing cookies off a tray. My house still stands. Same chipped counters, same humming fridge. But the silence, it's new and heavy. My name is Eloise Martinez. I'm 74 years old, and I raised my son Daniel on my own after his father passed when he was just 5. I was 27 when I became a widow. My husband, Martin, worked construction. One rainy day, the scaffold collapsed, and just like that, I was both mother and father. We didn't have much. I cleaned homes, cooked for neighbors, even babysat kids that weren't mine just to keep food on our table. But I always made sure Daniel had his own bed, his own books, and warm shoes when the season turned. I missed meals so he wouldn't, skipped doctor visits so he could see his. When he got into college, first in the family, I cried like I had won the lottery. I sold the tiny jewelry Martine gave me over our 10-year marriage to help with tuition. I told myself it was what Martine would have wanted. I was proud. So proud. Years passed. Daniel became a mechanical engineer. Got a job, met Maribel, his wife, and bought a little home on the outskirts of town. I helped with the down payment. $40,000 I had been saving for my retirement, for emergencies. But when Daniel asked, I didn't hesitate. You've done so much already, Mama, he said. I laughed and told him, it's what mothers do. And then time slipped. Seasons folded into years. I watched my son build a life, and I stood at the sidelines like a quiet extra. At first, they invited me to everything. Every birthday, every Sunday dinner, every small celebration. I made tamales and arroz con leche, always too much, but they always got eaten. Then, things changed. It started small. No need to bring food, Mama, we've got it covered. Then, we're keeping it low-key this year, just the kids. And then, Maribel's mom is staying with us this week, maybe another time? I began to recognize the pattern. You know when a door doesn't slam shut, but slowly drifts until it clicks closed? That's what happened. But I made excuses. They're busy. They're starting their own traditions. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. I convinced myself I wasn't being pushed away. I was just stepping back. Being respectful. Still, I kept giving. When Maribel lost her job, I offered to help with groceries. When their daughter, my granddaughter, Lucia, started dance class, I slipped a few hundred into Daniel's coat pocket to help cover the fees. And every single birthday, I made him his favorite flan, even when I wasn't invited to eat it with them. But this year was different. This year was my 74th birthday. Daniel had called 3 days before, said he'd stop by. I dressed up a little, blue cardigan, the one with pearl buttons I saved for special days. I lit a cinnamon candle. I even put on lipstick, just a soft rose tint. I waited and waited. Then around 7:30 p.m., he came in. No cake, no Lucia, no Maribel, just him. Sorry, Mama. Things got hectic, he said, rubbing the back of his neck. He handed me an envelope. I smiled, trying not to look disappointed. But I felt it in my bones. You know that ache in your chest that has nothing to do with your heart and everything to do with the people in it? Inside was a plastic gift card. Grocery store, $25. I swallowed hard and said, Gracias, mijo. He sat for 10 minutes, scrolled his phone. Then said he had to go. That night I made myself tea and tried not to cry, but my bones ached. I felt foolish, like I had given everything I had, My youth, my savings, my loyalty, and gotten crumbs in return. Then I opened my Facebook, and there they were. A dozen photos from that same day, Daniel and Maribel, grinning from ear to ear, holding a giant gift-wrapped envelope. Maribel's mother standing beside them, eyes glossy with tears. The caption: "Surprised mom with her dream ranch in Santa Rosa. Worth every penny to see her smile." I couldn't move. Not because of jealousy. No, but because that was supposed to be me. I had sacrificed more than that woman ever would. I had poured every ounce of myself into Daniel's life. And yet, on my birthday, I got silence and a plastic card. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at the framed photo of Daniel in his graduation gown, my proudest moment, and I whispered to no one, "What did I do wrong?" The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Gloria. Gloria is my oldest friend. We grew up together in Bakersfield, both married young, both widowed young, and both raised children as single mothers. But where I kept giving, Gloria learned to protect her peace. She came over with pan dulce and strong opinions. "You're too soft, Elo, always have been." I chuckled through my tears. She looked at the gift card, then at me. "Enough," she said. "It's time you stop acting like you owe him the world. You raised him. You paid your dues." "But he's my son," I whispered. "No," she said firmly. "He's a grown man who just handed your place in his life to someone else. It's time you find out what else he's handed over behind your back." I blinked. "What do you mean? Have you checked your accounts lately? The house deed? The trust Martine left?" My heart skipped. I hadn't. I trusted Daniel with my paperwork, with everything. "Come," Gloria said, pulling out her phone. "We're going to check everything, together." And that was the moment. I felt the shift. The quiet in my house wasn't peaceful because I had let others take up all the space. But not anymore. Not after this. Gloria didn't waste time. The next morning, she showed up with a yellow legal pad, a cup of café de olla, and that sharp look in her eyes that always made me feel like a child about to get a lesson I wasn't ready for, but needed. "First things first," she said, setting down the pad. "Do you have your bank statements?" I shuffled to my bedroom where I kept a little metal box under my bed, my important things box. Inside were old tax returns, a few postcards from Lucia when she was younger, Martine's death certificate, and bank documents. I handed her everything. She flipped through the pages with the focus of an auditor and the speed of a woman who had learned hard lessons early. "You've got more in savings than I thought," she said, glancing up. "But did you know there's a joint account here with Daniel's name on it?" My breath caught. I added him years ago, in case something happened. And since then, I don't know. I never really checked. Gloria raised a brow. We went online, using my old desktop with its humming tower and dusty monitor. After some password resets and waiting on hold with the bank, I got in. And what I saw made my stomach knot. In the last 4 years, Daniel had withdrawn nearly $48,000. Some were labeled as repairs, others simply miscellaneous. I scrolled slowly. Home improvements, a down payment, Lucia's tuition, but I had already given cash for that. $3,200 from April 2021, Gloria muttered. "That's not repairs. That's a vacation." I wanted to believe it was all a misunderstanding, that he'd meant to pay it back, that he just forgot to tell me. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't carelessness. It was entitlement, and I had fed it for years. I sat back in the chair, the worn cushion sinking under my weight, and stared at the screen. He hadn't stolen from a stranger. He had stolen from me. Quietly. Over time, like boiling a frog, slowly turning up the heat until I wouldn't even notice. "I gave him everything," I whispered. "I know," Gloria said gently. "And he took everything. Now we do something about it." The next step was the house, the one Martine and I bought for $42,000 in 1978. Back then, it was the size of a shoebox and creaked in the wind, but it was ours. After Daniel finished college, I added his name to the deed just in case. That phrase again. Always meant to prepare, never suspect. Gloria helped me pull up county property records. The air left my lungs when I read the line, primary owner, Daniel Martinez. My name was gone. I blinked, refreshed the page. Still gone. When did this happen? I whispered, my voice cracking. March of last year, Gloria said, pointing. See the filing date? I couldn't breathe. March. That was around the time Daniel had asked me to sign some refinancing paperwork so he could help me lower my property taxes. He brought a notary, said it was just routine. I signed without reading, my own signature. Right there, I had handed him the house like a fool. I stood up, heart pounding. The room felt tilted. I grabbed the edge of the table. You okay? Gloria asked. I need air. I walked out to the porch, the soft breeze brushing against my cheeks. The bougainvillea I planted 20 years ago had overgrown, blooming bright pink against the fading stucco wall. Everything looked the same, but nothing was. I sat on the bench Martine built, closed my eyes, and I cried. Not loud, not sobbing, but those quiet, shaking tears that fall from the soul. How did I get here? How did a mother's love turn into something so disposable? That night, I didn't sleep. My brain wouldn't stop spinning. I kept seeing Daniel's little boy face and overlaying it with the man he had become. How could he? Why would he? I needed answers. So the next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. Gloria had a referral. Esther Palomares, a probate and elder law attorney who worked with a lot of retired women in similar situations. I made the appointment. Esther was in her early 50s, with a calm demeanor and a voice like warm oatmeal, steady and kind. She reviewed my documents, my account activity, and the deed transfer. Then she looked at me gently. Eloise, what your son did was legally allowed only because you gave consent. But that doesn't make it right, and we can still fight this. I sat up straighter. You mean I can get my house back? It'll take time, possibly court. But yes, we can challenge the deed, especially if you were misled about what you were signing. You didn't understand the full implications, and that's something courts take seriously. She leaned forward. But more importantly, I recommend we create a new will and power of attorney. Move your remaining funds into a trust that's protected. No one else's name, just yours. I nodded, heart pounding. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something. That afternoon, I signed the paperwork. A new will, a protective trust, a cease on any further withdrawals from the old joint account, and a legal challenge to reverse the house deed transfer. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. A week later, I invited Daniel over. Just him. When he arrived, I had coffee brewing and the kitchen table cleared. No candles. No food. No small talk. He sat down, looking distracted, thumbing through his phone. Is this about Lucia's recital? He asked. I slid the manila folder across the table. Bank records, deed filings, a copy of the new trust, and a letter from Esther outlining the legal steps we'd taken. He stopped moving. What's this? He asked, voice flat. You've been dipping into my savings, Daniel, I said, voice trembling but clear. And you took my house without telling me the truth. He leaned back, blinking like he'd been slapped. Mama, I thought you wanted me to have the house. You signed. I signed what you told me was tax paperwork. He rubbed his temples. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought you didn't need much. And we've got more expenses now with Maribel's mom living with us. I nodded slowly. That's what hurts most. That you assumed I needed less. That you forgot I existed unless you needed something. He looked down. I continued. I'm taking it all back. The house. The control over my money. My peace. He swallowed. So what? You're cutting me off. I tilted my head. No, mijo, you cut yourself off. I just finally noticed. He didn't argue, didn't apologize. He just stood and left. That night, the house felt different, still quiet. But this time, it was my quiet. Not the silence of being forgotten, the silence of reclaiming space. And for the first time in a long time, I slept with the door unlocked and my heart at ease. The morning after I confronted Daniel, I woke up to a strange calm. Not peace, not yet, but a quiet strength. Like I had found the handle to a door I thought was sealed shut. I still felt the ache, the heaviness that comes from realizing your child doesn't see you as you anymore, only as an obstacle or a resource. But now that ache had a purpose. It wasn't just pain. It was fuel. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat by the window. The light streamed through the lace curtains I'd sewn when Daniel was still in high school, back when I had time for that kind of thing. The thread had yellowed, but the stitchwork still held strong, much like me. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. Maribel posted new photos. I don't usually scroll much, but something made me open the app. Maybe I was still searching for proof that I wasn't crazy. That what I felt wasn't just some misunderstood moment. That my birthday being forgotten, my house being taken, my savings slowly drained, was as cruel as it felt. And there they were. A new photo album titled, Mom's Dream Life Begins. I clicked it. The first photo nearly knocked the air out of me. Maribel's mother, standing in front of a beautiful 2-story ranch-style home, Spanish tile roof, a big red bow on the gate, Daniel beside her, holding a welcome home sign. The caption, after all she sacrificed for us, we're finally giving her the life she deserves. 300,000 well spent. Well spent. The words echoed in my ears. After all she sacrificed for us. I kept scrolling. Photo after photo of the inside, vaulted ceilings, granite counters, horses grazing in the distance. And then I saw it. One photo, blurry but enough to freeze me. On the kitchen island was a folder. Just barely open. Inside I could make out paperwork and a signature, my signature. I zoomed in, my name, looped in blue ink, just visible through the clear plastic sleeve. What was my signature doing on a document inside that house? My heart pounded. I took a screenshot, and then another. There was no caption on that photo, like they hadn't meant for it to be noticed. But I noticed. I always noticed the things people tried to hide. Years of being the woman behind the scenes, washing dishes while they laughed in the other room, folding blankets while they rested. I'd learned to spot the things no one else looked for. I called Gloria. She arrived 30 minutes later with a stern face and a thumb drive. I showed her the photo. She squinted, then gasped. That's your signature. I know. But what kind of document is that? We stared at it together. Grainy, slanted. Then she looked at me. You still have the notary receipt from when Daniel had you sign those refinancing papers last year. I nodded. I never throw things away. I went to my metal box and pulled out the old receipt. There it was, in black and white. Refinance and property transfer, Martinez residence. We drove straight to Esther's office. She examined the photo, the receipts, the notary name. Her brow furrowed. This may go deeper than we thought, she said. If this house, Maribel's mother's, was bought with money from your accounts, or based on equity taken from your property, we may be looking at serious fraud. I sat still. Fraud. A word I never thought would be connected to my own son. Esther turned her monitor toward us. We're going to need a forensic accountant. Over the next 2 weeks, everything moved fast. Esther connected me with a financial investigator named Renata, a sharp young woman who asked tough questions without sugarcoating. She combed through my records, Daniel's withdrawals, my house's equity history, even tax records. The findings made my stomach drop. Daniel had taken out a second mortgage on my house just before transferring the deed to himself. With that money, he contributed $180,000 toward the purchase of the new ranch. The rest came from a personal loan using our shared account as collateral. In simple terms, my home had funded the gift for Maribel's mother, and I never even knew it. My tears came fast and hot. "This isn't just betrayal," I whispered. "It's theft." Renata nodded. "You have a case, Mrs. Martinez. A strong one. Weeks passed. Legal filings were made. Letters were sent. But I didn't speak to Daniel. He didn't call. Not even to argue or apologize. Until one day he showed up. It was late afternoon, sun just starting to dip, casting long shadows across my porch. I heard the knock. I opened the door slowly. He stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes tired. "Mama," he said softly. I didn't invite him in. He shifted uncomfortably. "Why are you doing this?" I looked at him, really looked. This man who once clung to my hand crossing the street, who scraped his knees chasing the neighbor's dog, who sobbed in my arms when he didn't get into his first-choice college, now standing here, accusing me. "I'm doing this," I said quietly, "because you forgot I was a person, not just your mother." His jaw tightened. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" I said, voice rising. "You used my name, my house, my money, to buy someone else a dream home. You didn't even tell me. You looked me in the eye, told me it was paperwork to help lower taxes. I trusted you, Daniel." He didn't speak. "I sat alone on my birthday while you played hero to someone else's mother." Still silent. "I didn't raise you for this." He swallowed. I thought you'd be fine. You're always fine. You have the house, no expenses, no car payments. I had the house," I snapped. "Until you took it." We stared at each other. Years of love and labor and silence hanging between us. "You used to say I was your hero," I said, softer now. "What changed?" He blinked, then looked away. "I got busy. I thought I was helping. I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," I whispered. "And now you have to face that." He left without saying more, and I closed the door, not just the wooden one, the emotional one, the one that stayed open far too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window and stared at the stars. So many nights I used to rock Daniel to sleep and whisper, "I'll always be here." I thought that was what love meant, always being there no matter what. But now I understood something else. Love also means knowing when to stop letting someone hurt you. The next day, Esther filed the final petition. Our case was strong. Forged understanding of documents, misuse of shared finances, and property theft through deception. I wasn't seeking punishment. I was seeking justice, and something deeper than that. Dignity. I had let guilt and motherhood blur the lines for too long. I'd been afraid of being too harsh, of causing a rift. But the rift was already there. He just didn't think I'd ever notice, or that I'd do anything about it. Now he knew. I wasn't just his mother. I was me, and I had finally remembered who that was. The courthouse smelled of floor wax and paper, sterile and cold, the kind of place that felt like it didn't care who you were, only what could be proven. I clutched my purse tightly as I followed Esther through the tall glass doors. My palms were sweating, and my shoes, just a sensible black pair I'd worn to church many times, suddenly felt too tight. "You okay?" Esther asked, pausing by the metal detector. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. I was about to sit in front of strangers and tell them that my own son had stolen my home, my savings, my trust. I was about to let them see the bruises on my heart, not ones you could photograph, but the kind that took years to form and longer to heal. "I'm ready," I said anyway. We made our way to the courtroom, small, quiet. A few wooden benches and a long table where we sat across from Daniel and his lawyer. He looked tired. Older. His tie was crooked. He didn't look at me. Part of me still hoped he'd apologize, but he didn't. The judge entered. A woman, maybe in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled into a bun and glasses that sat low on her nose. Her nameplate read Judge Clara Mendel. She reviewed the opening statements quickly. Esther spoke with calm authority, laying out our case: the forged understanding of documents, the manipulation of shared finances, and the unethical transfer of property. Daniel's lawyer countered with soft words: misunderstandings, familial trust, no malice intended. They tried to frame it as a son helping his aging mother manage her affairs. But I knew what that really meant: controlling her, replacing her, silencing her. Then it was my turn to speak. The judge looked at me directly. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, "you may begin." I stood slowly, gripping the table for support, and walked toward the front. My knees trembled, but I kept my back straight. "I am 74 years old," I began, "and I never imagined I'd be standing here asking the court to give me back the life I already built with my own hands." I looked at Daniel then. My son is sitting right there, the boy I raised alone, the man I supported when he had nothing, the person I gave my savings to, my home, my name on documents, my trust. I turned back to the judge, and he took those things and gave them to someone else's mother on my birthday. A hush fell over the room. Even Daniel's lawyer looked down. I signed papers I didn't understand because he told me it was for my benefit. I shared a bank account because I believed he would protect me. Instead, he used it to drain me of almost $50,000 over several years, without ever once asking, without ever once explaining. And when I saw that house, that ranch, being gifted to my daughter-in-law's mother, I knew. I paused, letting the words settle. I knew I was no longer seen, just used. The judge tilted her head. "And what are you asking this court to do, Mrs. Martinez?" I took a breath. "I want my house back. I want my name cleared of the debts that were taken in my name without my knowledge. I want control of my finances returned to me. And more than anything, I want the dignity of knowing that what was mine, what I earned, what I gave, wasn't taken because I was old and easy to ignore." Esther touched my elbow gently. "You did beautifully," she whispered as I returned to my seat. Daniel still didn't look at me, but I didn't need him to anymore. The court took a week to decide. A long week of waiting, during which I kept busy cleaning out the shed, reorganizing my linen closet, and baking pan dulce I didn't need. Gloria came by almost every day, bringing gossip and hot tea. "You look 10 years younger," she said one evening, watching me knead dough. "I feel 10 years lighter," I replied, because no matter how the court ruled, I had acted. I hadn't stayed silent. I hadn't swallowed my pain. I stood up, for once, for myself. When the judgment came, it was Esther who called. I held the phone with both hands. "Eloise," she said softly, "we won." I didn't respond right away. "I repeat," she said, now laughing, "we won." The court ruled that the property transfer was invalid due to lack of informed consent and clear evidence of deception. My house would be returned to my name. Daniel would be required to pay back a portion of the funds taken, or face legal garnishment. The judge also approved the protective trust, ensuring no further manipulation could touch my finances. I sank into my armchair, eyes stinging. "Thank you," I whispered. But really, I wasn't thanking her. I was thanking the version of myself who had finally said no more. A week later, I received the official documents, my name on the deed again, the trust established, a new bank account in my name only. The old one, where Daniel had siphoned away my years of sacrifice, was closed. That night, I sat on the porch, the same one where Martine used to drink his beer at sunset, where Daniel had played with his toy trucks, where I had spent years waiting for someone to remember I was still here. Now I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. Gloria brought over a bottle of wine, and we sat under the soft porch light, listening to the distant sound of crickets and wind through the trees. Cheers to being old and terrifying, she said, clinking her glass against mine. I laughed. A real one, the kind I hadn't felt in years. You know, I said, I used to think being a mother meant giving until there was nothing left. And now I know, being a mother means teaching your children that love isn't a license to take. Daniel never came back. He sent one letter. No apology, just a short note. I didn't realize how badly I hurt you. I don't agree with everything, but I hope you find peace. I folded it, placed it in the same metal box under my bed, and didn't reply. Because peace, I was already finding. But not because he gave it to me, because I took it back. The summer heat came early that year. The air was thick and lazy, curling through my open windows and dancing with the scent of cinnamon and lemon from the candles I'd lit that morning. But my house, felt different now. Not because of the temperature, but because of the air inside me. It was no longer filled with waiting. Waiting for my son to call, waiting to be invited, waiting to feel seen. Now it was filled with presence. I woke up when I wanted. I made my own coffee the way I liked, 2 sugars, 1 splash of cream. And for the first time in years, I found myself humming while I dusted the bookshelves, folding laundry, pruning the plants in the window boxes Martine built all those years ago. I'd forgotten how comforting it could be to take care of things just because they mattered to me. Gloria joked that I'd become a new woman. But the truth was, I was just becoming the woman I used to be, before life and motherhood and heartbreak had asked me to shrink. A letter arrived on a Thursday, not from Daniel. Not this time. It was from Lucia, my granddaughter. The envelope was pale pink, the kind little girls usually choose when they want something to feel special. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper in her neat, looping script. Dear Abuela, Mom and Dad say I shouldn't be writing you. But I miss you. I miss your flan and your stories. I didn't know about the house. Or the money. I only knew you stopped coming around. I'm sorry. I hope one day I can visit you again. Maybe when I turn 18 and they can't tell me what to do anymore. Love, Lucia. I read it twice, then again. Tears pricked my eyes, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from hope. That maybe, somewhere in the middle of everything, a little piece of our bond had survived. That the love I poured into her wasn't completely erased by the bitterness her parents had allowed to settle between us. I wrote back. A simple note. Mi cielo. You are always welcome in my home. Always. You don't need to pick sides. Love doesn't have to be war. I will be right here whenever you're ready. Love, Abuela Eloise. I didn't mail it right away. I waited a week, unsure. I even folded it, tucked it into the pages of my Bible. But one morning, I found the courage. I mailed it to the return address she'd listed, her school. If she never replied, that was okay. I just wanted her to know that my door was still open. But this time, not wide open to be used. Just open enough for love to come in, if it was ready. One afternoon, I pulled out Martine's old journal. He'd only written in it once a month or so, usually thoughts, memories, or letters he never sent. I hadn't opened it in years. I turned the pages, and one entry caught me. July 10th, 1981, Eloise didn't eat all day today. She used the money to buy Daniel new school shoes instead. She said they had lightning stripes, and that he'd run faster in them. He ran around the yard shouting, "I'm lightning! I'm lightning!" I don't think she saw me watching. I wish she would let me buy her something. Anything. But she won't let me. She just smiles and says, "There's time for me later." She doesn't know. Time isn't promised. I touched the words. Martine always knew. Knew how much I gave. Knew how I disappeared behind everyone else's needs. And I had done that for decades. But I was done waiting for later. Later was now. I started going to the senior center again. I hadn't been in years. It always felt like admitting something, that I was aging, that I needed something from others. But I realized now, asking for company, for joy, for laughter, wasn't weakness. It was life. I joined a gardening group, helped start a book club, took a painting class on a whim. At first, I felt silly. The paintbrush felt foreign in my hand. I hadn't held one since Daniel was in grade school, and we used to sit on the back porch with cheap watercolors and draw the clouds. But that first stroke, green and clumsy across the canvas, felt like a thread being pulled free from a knot in my chest. By the third class, I had painted the entire front view of my house, bougainvillea and all. The instructor said, "You have a storyteller's touch," and maybe I did. Because every brushstroke carried a memory, and every memory was mine again. I hadn't heard from Daniel in months, and honestly, I was okay with that. There was no more yearning, no more pacing by the phone, no more questioning if I'd done something wrong. Because now I understood something fundamental. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had just stopped letting people rewrite the story of my life without my consent. But then, one Saturday afternoon in late August, the doorbell rang. I opened it, expecting Gloria or the mailman. Instead, it was Maribel. Her face was tired, her eyes puffy. She held a brown paper bag in one hand. "Can I come in?" she asked. I hesitated, but then I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, like someone entering a sacred space. I led her to the kitchen table, the same place where I had once handed Daniel the documents that unknowingly erased me from my own home. She placed the bag on the table and sat down. "I didn't come to fight," she said softly. "I came because I needed to say something." I waited. She looked around the room, at the photos on the walls, the embroidered table runner, the little porcelain rooster on the shelf that Lucia used to call Senor Cluck. "You loved him better than anyone ever has," she said finally. "And he took that for granted." I said nothing. "I did too," she admitted. "You were always giving, always showing up. And when we started doing better, we left you behind." She looked up, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." There was silence. Then she opened the bag. Inside was a small tin, my flan dish, the one I had left at their house years ago, forgotten in the back of a cabinet. And beneath it, a photo of Lucia and me laughing on the swing set in their old yard. "She found this," Maribel said. "It's in her locker at school. She says it's her favorite photo." That was when I cried. Not the broken kind of crying, the healing kind, the kind that lets something finally go. Maribel stayed for coffee. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We didn't talk about the court. We talked about Lucia's drawings and how she wanted to be an artist, and how she still made her dolls talk in funny accents. When she left, she hugged me. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel like a performance. It felt like a beginning, not of what we had before, but of something new, something honest, something earned. I set the flan tin in the center of my kitchen table, right on top of the woven mat Gloria gave me last Christmas. It had a sunflower stitched into the corner, faded now, but still bright. I ran my fingers along the rim of the tin, remembering the last time I used it. Lucia was maybe 8. She stood on a step stool beside me, her tiny hands sticky with condensed milk, trying to stir too fast. We spilled sugar all over the counter. She laughed so hard she got the hiccups. We ate the flan warm that night, barely waiting for it to set. Now that tin sat like an artifact, once ordinary, now holy. It wasn't about the dish. It was about what it meant. It had come back. She had come back, not in full, not with grand gestures, but with a whisper. And sometimes a whisper is enough to keep the soul from going silent. Gloria came over the next day with a carton of strawberries and an eyebrow raised so high I thought it might escape her forehead. "Maribel? At your table?" she said, pouring herself a glass of agua fresca. I nodded. She said sorry. Gloria snorted. People say sorry when they get caught. She didn't ask for anything. Yet, I smiled. "You know, you always think you're the tough one." She raised her glass, "Because I am." We both laughed. But beneath the laughter, I knew what she meant. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but forgetting, that's something else. I wasn't going to forget. Not the silence on my birthday. Not the fake paperwork. Not the feeling of sitting alone while someone else's mother was celebrated with my money, in a home built on my name. But forgiveness, that was for me. Letting go didn't mean letting them back in. It just meant I was done carrying the weight. That weekend, I baked flan, real flan from scratch. None of that boxed stuff. The kind that takes 3 different pans and patience and love. I packed it in a container with a little note taped to the top. Para ti, mi cielo, abuela. And I asked Gloria to drop it off at Lucia's school office on Monday. She made a face. You sure? I'm sure. She'll eat it. She'll feel it. A week later, a letter came in the mail. This time with a little hand-drawn sticker sealing the flap, a sunflower and a spoon. I smiled before I even opened it. Abuela, I got the flan. I shared it with my best friend and told her all about how you taught me to crack eggs with one hand. She didn't believe me. Thank you for sending it. I still have the tin. I cleaned it myself. They're not mad at me for writing to you, but I can tell it makes things tense. I just want you to know, I don't care. I love you, and I'll keep writing if you want me to. Also, I'm trying to draw your house. I'm not that good yet, but I'm practicing. Love, Lucia. I read it 3 times. Each time, my heart swelled just a little more. Then I picked up my sketch pad. Yes, I'd bought one for painting, but suddenly it seemed to have other uses too, and I drew a sunflower with a big spoon in the middle. I mailed it with a note. You don't have to be good. You just have to keep trying. That's how I learned to make flan. Life moved on, quietly at first, but with small, steady joys. My house became a place of warmth again, not just for me, but for the few good souls I allowed in. Gloria, of course, came every Thursday. My neighbor Miriam, who'd just lost her husband, started coming over for soup and long talks about grief and Netflix. I painted. I wrote letters. I joined a Spanish poetry reading group and surprised myself by standing up one night and reading a piece I'd scribbled on the back of a receipt. It was about a woman who lived in a house with a red gate and pink bougainvillea, who once felt invisible but now shone like the last candle in a blackout. They clapped. Some even cried. And I felt seen. Then one Sunday, there was a knock on my door. Not the rushed, guilty knock of someone with a reason to lie. A gentle one. I opened it. Lucia stood there, a little taller, hair tied back, holding a sketch pad under one arm and a grocery bag in the other. Hi, she said. My throat tightened. I smiled. Hi, mi amor. She stepped inside like she never left, like she had always belonged. We sat at the table. I served café con leche. She pulled out a jar of caramel she'd made herself, her first attempt at the flan topping. It's too runny, she said. I used to make it too dark, I said. Burned it 3 times in 1 week. We laughed. And then we talked. Really talked. She told me how school was hard, how she didn't know what she wanted to be, that she felt caught between 2 worlds, loving her parents but knowing what they did wasn't right. I told her she didn't have to choose sides. I don't want you to hate them, I said. Just don't forget who you are. I won't, she whispered. When she left, she hugged me tight, and I whispered in her ear, You are the best thing that ever came out of all this. She nodded. I know, abuela. Later that night, I looked around my little kitchen. The flan tin sat in the sink, waiting to be washed. The tablecloth was a little wrinkled. The candle had burned low, but everything was right. Not perfect, just right. Because I had walked through fire and come out whole, not just because I fought back, but because I remembered who I was before the world convinced me I had to disappear to be loved. They gave her the ranch. They gave me a card. But I gave myself everything else. Peace, strength, dignity, and a granddaughter who still knew where home was. I always thought stories like mine ended in heartbreak. In empty chairs at birthday dinners, in echoing rooms filled with what could have been, in children who stopped calling because they'd rewritten you into something forgettable. But I was wrong. Stories like mine don't end in loss. They end in rebirth, and sometimes they end with the very people who hurt you having to watch you shine without them. It was a Tuesday when the letter came from Daniel's lawyer. I sat by the window, hands warm from a mug of chamomile tea, when I heard the mail slip through the slot and land on the floor. The envelope was thick, formal. I knew it was from him before I even read the return address. It was an official settlement proposal. I opened it slowly. The offer was simple. Daniel wanted to avoid ongoing legal action, so he'd agreed to sign a full transfer of the house back to me, already ordered by the judge, but now also offered to repay the remaining funds he took from our shared account in monthly installments, $300 a month. It would take over a decade to repay what he'd drained in 4 years. There was no apology in the letter, just terms. I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because the man who once took my silence for permission was now begging for my quiet again. And this time, I wasn't giving it. I called Esther. "Should I accept this?" I asked. She paused. "Legally, you can fight for more. Garnish wages, press charges. But it depends on what you want." I thought about that for a long time. And then I said something I hadn't said in 74 years of living. I want him to sit across from me and listen. We arranged a mediation meeting. Not court. Not lawyers speaking over each other. Just a room. A table. 2 chairs. And the truth. He walked in first, older, deflated. The lines on his face deeper than they should have been for a man his age. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I didn't pretend. He sat down, eyes flicking to mine, then away again. "I guess this is what it's come to," he muttered. "No," I said calmly. "This is what you brought it to." He exhaled sharply. "I never meant to hurt you, Mama, but you did." The room fell silent. I leaned forward. "You took my house, my money. You erased me from papers I built with my life's work. And then you gave someone else's mother a life I never asked for, but earned 10 times over." His jaw clenched. "Maribel's mom was sick. We thought she wouldn't make it. So you made sure she had security? Comfort?" I said, eyes sharp. "And what about me?" He said nothing. I continued, my voice firm now. "I was your first home, Daniel. I carried you, clothed you, ate less so you could have more. I never asked for repayment. But what I deserved was respect." He finally looked at me. "I was overwhelmed," he said, voice cracking. "I thought you'd always be okay. I thought you didn't need much anymore." I leaned back. "You thought wrong." Silence again. I slid the folder across the table, the same one I used months ago when this all began. Inside were copies of all the documentation, the reverse deed, the bank transfers, the signed protective trust, and the ruling in my favor. "I'm not here to negotiate," I said. He swallowed hard. "Then why did you ask to see me?" "Because I want you to understand what you lost. Not the money, not the house, me." His eyes welled. "I don't want to lose you." I shook my head softly. "You already did." He didn't speak after that. He just signed the final papers. No more monthly promises. No drawn-out delays. I told him I wanted the funds returned directly within 6 months, or we would proceed with wage garnishment. He nodded. And when he stood to leave, I remained seated. I didn't stand, because I was done rising for people who never looked down to help me up. Gloria came over that night with a bottle of tamarind soda and a ridiculous grin. "So?" she asked. "He signed everything. And I don't feel relief," I said. "I feel clean." "Good," she said, clinking her glass to mine. "You should." I looked around my kitchen. The place I had nearly lost, the walls I painted, the photos I rehung, the books I dusted, my life reclaimed. Not the version shaped by guilt and obligation. The version shaped by choice. A month later, I received another letter, not from Daniel. From Lucia. "Abuela, Dad told me he saw you. He didn't say much, but I could tell something changed. You were right. You didn't disappear. You were taken for granted. I want to come visit again. This time, I want to sleep over. I want to bake flan. I want to paint the front gate. I'm turning 17 next month. I'd rather be with you than anyone else, if that's okay. I cried. But this time, they were tears of arrival, not sorrow. I called her school and arranged a visit. When she arrived, she brought her backpack, 3 tubes of paint, and a journal full of sketches. We sat on the porch for hours. She painted the gate a soft green, then added vines and little gold flowers. When it dried, she stepped back and said, "Now it looks like it's glowing." And it did. So did she. So did I. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling. The house creaked like it always did. The wind whispered through the bougainvillea. And for once, I didn't feel like a shadow in someone else's story. I was the author again. I thought about the title of my life, if I had to give it one. She gave everything. Then she took herself back. I smiled. Because I had. People often ask, how do you survive betrayal from your own child? Here's my answer. You don't just survive. You rebuild. You plant flowers in the places where they buried your voice. You draw borders around your peace like fences around a garden. You look in the mirror and say, they forgot who I was, but I remembered. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Because when the people who are supposed to protect you become the ones you need protection from, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to outgrow your own blood, not in hatred, but in wisdom. And in love for yourself, because you matter. Not because of what you gave, not because of who you raised, but because of who you are. And now, I am mine again. Fully, finally, forever.